I'm going to take absolutely no side comments today. This is going to be a well-run meeting. Good morning, everyone. Whether you want it or not, I'm your chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the main estimates 2018-19, Vote 1 under the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying. Vote 1 under the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Vote 1 under the Office of the Senate Ethics Officer. Vote 1 and 5 under Offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada, referred to the committee on Monday, April 16th, 2018. And so this morning, we're very, very pleased to have from the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying, Madame Bélanger and François Bertrand. And we will begin with your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. This is my first appearance before you as Commissioner of Lobbying, and I want to let you know that I feel quite at home in my new position. The staff has been most welcoming and supportive since my arrival. The team is comprised of professional and dedicated employees. I am quite fortunate to have them assisting me on the delivery of my mandate, aimed at enhancing transparency and accountability of federal lobbying activities. This objective contributes to Canadians' confidence in public office holders' decision-making. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the main estimates and outline the priorities of our office in the coming year. I am joined by François Bertrand, who's our Director of Registration and Client Services. Unfortunately, the CFO could not join us today. La loi sur le lobbying exige la réalisation de 3 activités.
The Lobbying Act mandates 3 key activities: to maintain the registry of lobbyists, to develop programs that foster awareness of the Act and the lobbyists' code of conduct, and to enforce compliance with the Act and the code. The 2018-19 main estimates for the office come to about $4.5 million. This is essentially the same amount as last year, and in fact, as the last 10 years. Our office is currently comprised of 26 full-time employees, and salaries continue to represent about 2/3 of the expenditures. Of the operating budget of approximately $1.5 million, about 40% are allocated to acquire services for program support and corporate services, such as human resources, finance, and contracting services. These services are obtained from other government institutions. This approach provides access to a broad set of expertise in a cost-effective manner. In addition, about $500,000 is expended towards obtaining IT services.
Last year's highlights. The registry is the primary tool for enabling transparency in lobbying. It is an online source of information on who is lobbying federal public office holders on what topics. The timeliness of reporting communications with designated public office holders remains high, as 94% of the over 23,000 monthly communication reports of last year's were filed on time. This is positive, as timely information leads to increased transparency. On the outreach front, I am particularly proud of the recent signing of an MOU with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner on matters related to education and outreach. With respect to compliance and enforcement, 2 files were referred to the RCMP and 1 report was tabled in Parliament. We currently have a caseload of 50 files. I am pleased to report that our employees developed a 3-year strategic plan to set priorities for the office. This plan identifies 4 key results areas, and I will share with you our priorities for 18-19. The first key area is a modern lobbyist registration system. A team develops and maintains the registry, while another provides guidance and advice to support registrants. Our office will undertake an evaluation of its registration and client services functions and begin implementing recommendations from last year's technical review. Work will focus on ensuring the data continues to be secure, keeping up with technological advances, enhancing not only the user experience, but also the compatibility with mobile devices. Le second secteur clé est l'amélioration.
The second key sector is enhanced outreach and communications for Canadians. Informing stakeholders of the requirements arising from the Act and the Code is important not only to increase their knowledge but also compliance. Upon my arrival, I reviewed the existing organizational structure. As a result, I decided not to appoint a deputy commissioner and operate with only 2 executive positions. I also eliminated the position of senior advisor to the commissioner. This allowed me to create a team dedicated to communications and outreach. To this end, our office will implement the recommendations from last year's evaluation of the program. We will update outreach materials and renew the website to make it easier for all to access the information they need. Following the signing of the MOU with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, we will set up joint webinars on issues of interest to both lobbyists and public office holders.
Is effective compliance and enforcement activities. The responsible team monitors and investigates allegations of breaches of the Act and the Code. The priority in this key area will be to continue to review our investigative procedures and practices in order to identify further efficiencies so that our findings are timely and relevant. Le quatrième secteur clé, mais certainement.
Fourth, but certainly not least, is an exceptional workplace. I wish to make our office an employer of choice by establishing a positive and healthy work environment which fosters engagement and innovation. Our office has developed and is implementing its strategy on mental health. We will explore initiatives to provide tools that will assist staff in developing positive mental health habits. We will also look at creating career development programs and opportunities for our employees as career advancement is limited in a small organization such as ours.
Preparing to move to a new location in 2019, providing an opportunity for us to better integrate knowledge across the organization and to modernize our IT systems. This project will require resources that were identified in the government's budget of 2018. We are also preparing for the pending legislative review of the Lobbying Act. We will be ready to meet with you when this exercise begins. Throughout my mandate, I will focus on initiatives that offer value for money to Canadians and that improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our operations. However, the fiscal constraints associated with our small organization cannot be overlooked. The budget of $4.5 million allows for very little flexibility to reallocate resources and really to plan long-term. The current registry is 10 years old, and important investments are required to ensure it remains up to date with rapidly evolving IT standards. The registry is vital for transparency. I will therefore continue to explore opportunities and, where necessary, make the funding requests to ensure that the registration system measures up to Canadians' needs. The year ahead will be an exciting one for our team, and it is with great enthusiasm that we take on these priorities. Mr. Chair, committee members, I thank you for your attention et je suis prête à répondre à vos questions. Merci.
And I'm prepared to welcome your questions.
Bélanger, and for the first 7 minutes, we've got Ms. Fortier.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm very pleased to see you here today. Thank you. I see that you have been in your position since December, and obviously we met with you last year, but I'm very pleased to see that things are going well. So could you talk to us a little bit about your transition, the relation that you have with the former commissioner, and how you were able to set up, and if there are issues that you've found at the outset when taking up your position? Well, I'll tell you that the transition was exceptionally well organized. I was welcomed with open arms by the team. I had 5 or 6 wonderful binders to go through, and they were ready. They were ready. It had been some time that the appointment of the new commissioner had been awaited, and the transition was really well done because of the team that's there and because of the former commissioner as well. It really went well. As to the issues upon arrival, I can tell you that there weren't any major challenges that for me, but what I had to learn was just to be acquainted with the employees. There are 26, and so it's important to have an interesting relationship or a close relationship with each of those people. And it's important to be well aware of the internal processes. I know how inquiries, investigations work, but it is important to find out how they work. My biggest personal challenge was really the organizational structure of the office, and that's really what caused me to ask myself the most questions. Do I need an assistant commissioner? And there were people in acting positions. I wasn't certain if I wanted to carry on with those appointments, and I really wanted to focus on outreach and communications. There were two people working on that, and I said in my opening statement that I didn't necessarily see the need for having someone to be my senior advisor. And I wanted someone working on outreach and communications. So that was my biggest challenge, and I think that we're comfortable now for the coming year to achieve our objectives. Well, indeed, with that review that you carried out, if I understand correctly, in terms of communications, you really wanted to focus on outreach and focus on that. So how will you do that? I know you spoke of a few ideas, but give us an idea of how you reach out to Canadians. So websites are all well and good, but how are you going to work? Well, I agree with you. It's all very nice to have a website, but we have to find ways to reach out to Canadians. We're thinking about that now, but before we reach out to Canadians, I have to reach out to you, the MPs and senators. There have been many articles in the media saying that people are not aware of lobbyists' obligations at our level, and so I really have to start from ground zero. I have to reach out to all of you by email. I think we've had, or I didn't do so, and I've had about a dozen answers, and I'm starting to meet individually with people now. So it's really basic outreach with lobbyists as well. So we just renewed our Twitter account. And it's really going to be a question of getting out and meeting people during the first year at least. Thank you very much. The other thing is we'll probably have the opportunity to review the legislation soon. And obviously, we'll be aware of that soon. So do you have any idea how you want to approach that issue? Do you already have an idea of what you want? Yes, indeed. I've already started the work. I was asked at the outset if I could be ready for the springtime, so I've had this in mind. And I'd say that I want to approach it thematically. So what can we do to improve transparency? What can we do in the Act to strengthen the outreach, indeed, and communications? And also in terms of compliance. Or enforcement. So that's my focus. In terms of transparency, it's a good act that we have. It's robust, but there's work that can be done and improvements that can be made. Probably significant duties is something we can look at later on, but it's definitely a part that should be improved. Meetings that are organized in advance should be declared. If you meet someone walking down the street, there's no need to report on that. So there are things we can do in terms of transparency. In terms of awareness, I'm thinking that perhaps we should make education mandatory for lobbyists. In terms of obligations, obviously we have to have a whole array of penalties that are possible for people who break the law or who breach the code. That gives me a good chance too.
I answered too fast.
Mais non, continue.
I'm talking too fast. What kind of process are you going to undertake? Because you have some ideas, I know. You want to consult. You have a team, as you've said, that is a bit smaller. Are you going to undertake a process to be able to develop your vision? Well, because I thought it might begin in the springtime, I couldn't undertake any kind of major consultation, so I started with the basic work done by the Commissioner in 2012, and I studied the files that have evolved since that time, and really I'm relying on the team. However, I met with a few lobbying organizations, and I certainly informed them that I would be approached soon. So I wanted to know if they had any ideas and recommendations, not to hesitate to share them with me. It doesn't mean I'll agree with them, but to approach me and tell me what they are thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Commissioner, for your attendance today. It's always good to see you. And congratulations. I think all of the committees around the table appreciate the MOU between your office and that of the Ethics Commissioner. And we understand, he appeared with us last week, and understand that you have two very separate mandates. So the MOU is working mostly on outreach education. But there is a question with regards to the reports from one office without a counterbalancing report from the other. Last year we had probably the most discussed, certainly the most discussed in Parliament, report from the Ethics Commissioner's office, the Trudeau report, but it involved activity by individuals covered by the Lobbying Act and your office. And I'm wondering what your thoughts might be when a significant report is issued by one office, that there might not be a counterbalancing report explaining the other side of what happened in the investigation carried out, assumably by both offices.
Okay. In a perfect world, all of our investigations would be done jointly. Honestly, because very often it's the flip side. And I worked in that office for 6 years, and obviously you can come out with two reports that will have opposite findings. And of course, in a perfect world, again, it would be great to do that. The problem is right now is our respective legislation doesn't allow to do that. We cannot exchange information about investigations. It's all conducted in private. And so I don't know the investigation that Commissioner Dion is investigating. He doesn't know what mine are, unless they've been made public. The thing is, with the particular file that you are talking about, it's a jurisdiction issue. The Aga Khan is not a lobbyist. And so people may have expected to obtain a report. But a decision was rendered, and I did not know this when I appeared in December, had been rendered back in September from the previous commissioner, that he does not meet the threshold of a lobbyist because he does not get paid. And this is all in the public domain, and this particular decision right now is subject to judicial review at the federal court. And so although people expected a report, the decision had already been made that he was not a lobbyist. And I read former Commissioner Dawson's report, and the interactions with public office holders is with everybody. And so he needs to look at the relationship that all of you have with everybody. I only look at lobbyists. And in this particular case, there was no flip report to be made.
Certainly. But in this case where there was so much public discussion, even while the original investigation by the Ethics Commissioner was proceeding, as the new Ethics Commissioner arrived, the question of unacceptable gifts not having to be registered on the gift registry, which indicates, and again, the Commissioner was somewhat circumspect in discussing what an unacceptable gift might be or might have been in this particular case, but it suggests that if an unacceptable gift was eventually not received or was returned, it must have been offered by somebody. And if it was unacceptable on the ethics side, am I fair in assuming it would be unacceptable from your office's side?
But my office's side has no jurisdiction over the Aga Khan because he's not a lobbyist.
But his foundation is.
His foundation. But if you look at the report, it is There's no indication that the foundation was involved in the gift giving.
So, okay.
So we're, yeah,
I-
those are the facts that
accept
we
your
were
answer.
working with.
Now, prior to the review of the Act,
Yes.
and with regards to your reference that you will be working to implement some of the changes that that you believe can be made without legislative amendments, will you be making operational changes in the reporting of lobby situations by all of those present in a room in a lobby situation, rather than the single individual which might report officially that lobby situation?
Oh, I don't know that I can, because it's in the regulations right now.
Oh, so that is a regulation
Yes,
that cannot be amended?
that you not name everyone that's in the room. I think that would be one that should be made.
That's a big-
But I don't have flexibility to change that. Je pense pas. C'est dans les règlements. Ouais, yeah, it's in the regulation.
But is it something that
Absolutely.
that any self-respecting, honest lobbyist might willingly agree to do without the imposition of new regulations?
Oh, that's a good question. Possibly.
Right.
Possibly. But I right now, the registry is not set up for that, so it would require some changes.
Okay,
But,
I understand.
yeah.
Can you give, and you've indicated that you'll be offering your thoughts on perhaps amendments that might be due, given the
Yes.
age of the existing Act later this year. Can you give us a heads up on any of the areas that we should be thinking about in advance of your suggestions, areas that are most needed of reform?
Certainly, the bigger ones is in the area of transparency, and yes, removing the word arranged, I think, is not a big change to be made in the law, and it would certainly enhance transparency, because right now the obligation is only to report monthly those communications that are oral and arranged in advance. That arranged should be dropped, as far as I'm concerned. The big one is the significant part of duties that is extremely difficult to enforce. And certainly on the enforcement front, develop a spectrum of sanctions. Right now, the way the Act is written is we start an investigation, and if there is an indication of an offense being someone is not timely, or has lobbied without being registered, or is lobbying while prohibited. Those are offenses. I have to suspend everything and send to the RCMP. We wait, and then we come back. We then can do a report, which is usually a report under the code, because really the commissioner has no authority to declare that there was an offense. I think, particular for timeliness, there needs to be some discretion to possibly impose, whether it be administrative monetary penalties or even simply a prohibition on lobbying. There needs to be a spectrum, because right now it's criminal or a report to Parliament and an attack to the reputation, and that's it. And it would be nice to really think that one through with all of the procedures that need to be put in place. But it's been done elsewhere, so it's possible.
Mr. Angus for 7 minutes.
Chair, and thank you, Madame Belanger. It's a pleasure to have you at our committee, and I want to say I have enormous respect for your predecessor. I think that she always felt the issue of the spirit of the Act was very crucial, because we've had situations, again, with two reports, one from the Ethics Commissioner and the Lobbying Commissioner, but the Accountability Act didn't foresee every possible loophole. It couldn't. So the spirit of the Act is crucial, and this is what I want to speak with you about this morning, because in every Parliament we deal with different sets of issues, different conundrums we didn't face before. And our committee right now is dealing certainly with the Facebook's scandal. And the issue of the sudden massive rise of very powerful U.S. data oligarchies is becoming a real concern. The Bank of Canada is actually saying that their power is now so great that it's actually threatening economic competitiveness in Canada. And the question is in the United States, we've seen Google, we've seen Facebook, Amazon move very heavily into not just lobbying, but actually putting key people into government positions because they do not want to be regulated. So this was the question I raised in my letter to you about Kevin Chan, and I know you're not in a position to talk about specifics, but the 20% rule, to me, is a very outmoded thought. If you have someone who's very connected to government, who can phone up, can meet politicians, be really friendly with them, meet with all senior ministers, his goal is to make sure that they really like him, like the company, and don't want to regulate him, and he doesn't meet the test of lobbying. What do you think we need to do to ensure that there's greater compliance with giant companies like Facebook and the spirit of the Act?
Okay. The significant part of duties is a threshold for in-house lobbyists. And historically, it's been interpreted quantitatively rather than qualitatively. Because when you read significant part of duties, you could think that significant also means the importance of the issue for them. But historically, it's never been, it's always been calculated in time. So it's 20%, meaning 1 day a week for about a month total. And it has to be total of the whole organization, not just one person. So if you add up the time of everybody. The problem I have with that, I'll start with that and then I'll see how we can address yours. The problem is that the Act is written in such a way that it's not transparency by design. It's the reverse. So you only have to register if you meet. So the onus is on the lobbyist to decide whether or not he meets that 20%, rather than reverse. You must register unless, and then we need to have that discussion of whether you want every single in-house lobbyist to register. That's a policy decision. There must have been at some point discussions when the Act was enacted that you wanted someone to be paid, and it has to be about a registrable activity. So that's the second thing we need to look at. It has to be about this change of state of affair, about a law, about a regulation, about a program, about a policy, or asking for money. So that's the second thing that we need to look at. So the law is quite prescriptive in a way, and I think that sort of needs to be fixed. And so I hear you on the significant part of duties, and I will always interpret the law to meet the spirit of it, but I also have to look at the second step of whether or not it's an activity that's actually registrable, if that's a word.
Right. Well, I guess because I think I like this idea of transparency by design is something we should be considering.
Yeah.
But the issue of a significant threshold, the Act is written for the average lobbyist who does the day job, knocking on doors, trying to sit down
Yes.
with their flip charts and stuff. But when you hire someone who has enormous political power, you're hiring them not to go knocking door to door. You're hiring them to make one phone call. Because when that person makes a phone call to the Prime Minister's office, people pick up.
Yes.
That's not, that person with that kind of influence doesn't do that 20% of the day in order
Yes.
to register, but that's why they're hired. And it seems to me that some of the issues we dealt with in the last Parliament kept coming back to this 20% rule. Very powerful companies are going to hire very powerful people to make that one call, to open a door, to fix something. And it doesn't have to be registered. So that's the question of how do we address the 20% threshold in a fair way?
Well, I am bound by the way the law is written right now, and I'll do what I can to look at the facts of the case and apply the law as best as I can. But it was a priority back in 2012. It will be one of my recommendations to eliminate it. I can tell you that across the country, there are a few provinces that have significant part of duties. The rest have threshold of hours per year. They're also recommending every time they've had an opportunity to get rid of that. So the solution is not necessarily to look for the number of hours. It really is to give significance. What's the importance of the issues? To look at criteria. Who is it that we want to to register to lobby, and it's not just about their time, it's also the importance of the issue. And maybe we'll have to think about, do we really want to involve everybody? So there might be some thresholds in number of employees, the operational budget, so we might have to look at criteria to remove, but certainly understand what you're telling me.
I want to ask one other question.
Yes.
One is, when the Accountability Act was brought in, and we were very much involved in working with that, there was a 5-year prohibition
Yes.
for senior public officials to go become lobbyists. But there's no prohibition for lobbyists to become senior public officials, which is very much the modus operandi right now of Google in the United States. And we see Leslie Church, who was in the Liberal leader's office, then went to work for Google as their senior head of communications and public affairs. And now Leslie Church is the chief of staff to Melanie Joly, who's the key minister on many of these files. Do we need to look at the issue of, I mean, who needs to lobby when you can just have them hired as the chief of staff to advise the minister? That's corporate influence. It's so much more direct than lobbying, but there is no prohibition, whereas a prohibition would be if she was chief of staff, she couldn't go become a lobbyist.
And we're at 7 minutes, so just briefly.
I right now I can only regulate lobbyists, and there is no prohibition. You're correct.
Thank you.
I can't really comment on that.
And the last 7 minutes go to Mr. Sani.
Good morning to you both. Thank you very much for coming. I'll be giving some of my time to Mr. Sheen this morning. So I want to ask you about the 2016-2017 your departmental results report, which I read. And there was a couple of things I wanted to ask you about that. It seems to me that there was a big increase in 2016-2017 in the total registration activities during that year, and also the number of time registry information that was accessed. Was this a one-time increase, or is this going to be the normal trend, do you feel?
I believe it will be a normal trend, but I don't know if you can answer that. We're preparing for the annual report right now. Has there been an increase in I think it's steady now, right? The number of registrants?
Because you jumped from 20,000 to 33,000.
Yes.
Roughly, so.
The number of registered lobbyists over the years has pretty much maintained the same, about 5,500 lobbyist registers at any one time. Of course, during the course of a year, there's lobbyists that do register and then end their registration once the lobbying is completed. So at any one time throughout the years, it's about 5,000 to 5,500 lobbyists registered at any time. There was a slight increase in for monthly communication report over the years, but it's becoming stable now. It's still it is higher than before, but it is stable now.
Okay, so you see that that's going to be the trend line now at that,
Yes.
at that number.
Yeah.
Okay, so also in the report, from 2014, when we look at the percentage of monthly communication reports that are accurate, that number seems to be dropping steadily from 97% to 95 to 93. Why are these files being filed inaccurately? What accounts for the decrease in the accuracy of these reports?
The accuracy of the reports?
Yes, according
Yes.
to...
And in the annual report, it'll be a close to 94% of accuracy. We verify the accuracy through reaching out to public office holders to let us know. We take about 5% of the monthly and we make a request. The inaccuracy is like they wrote down that a person was there and in fact they weren't, or it's a misspell of a name, or there was an issue discussed and it's not on the list. It's very minor, which is why we can't say it 100%, but nothing major about the accuracy.
So just minor little things here.
Yes, absolutely.
Also in the report, your predecessor mentioned that the office had begun to address essential maintenance issues that had been deferred as a result of previous budget reductions. Has that been resolved? And what is your plan going forward?
Has it been resolved? No.
No.
There was back in 2012, because of the exercise of reduction, there was a 5% given back, and so now we're continuing to survive with less money to play around with. And that's, I don't mean playing, but I mean to transfer into the registry. The registry is our main tool And what we've been doing for the since 2014 is continuing to maintain it. We continue to develop some parts, but we never have enough money to actually look at the whole thing and develop it. It's 10 years old. And so the team is extremely concerned that some components of it may no longer be supported, and then we have to continue to almost put Band-Aids instead of looking at it as a whole and relooking. Before, in the fall, the predecessor did ask Treasury Board for additional money for the registry. It was not granted in the budget, but I will continue to look at ways to invest in the registry to make sure that it continues to be modern.
So one final thought, and this is something that we've spoken with every commissioner with, and in terms of outreach and education, because I think that's extremely important. And I understand that you have a MOU with the Conflict and Ethics Commissioner, which is very good. What do you think, or how do you think you're going to approach, now that you're in this new role, and education is so important, do you have any ideas of how you're going to try to outreach, not only to maybe explain to lobbyists, to fill reports accurately, what's required of them, but also the public, to explain to them, what does the office actually do?
Yes. So as I said earlier, I need to start with lobbyists. I also need to reach out to public office holders and designated public officers so they understand their role when a lobbyist comes in. I'm hoping that with Commissioner Dion, and we're planning on doing webinars, and I'm really hoping we can reach out to Canadians. I'm also, I've been there 4 months, so we're thinking long term, but I think I need to reach out even possibly in universities and companies. Like, we just need to get out there so that people know what we really do and really the importance of why we do it. Very often in the media, lobbyists have a bad rap, or public office holders are embarrassed to admit that they're meeting with lobbyists. That should not be happening. And so there is a message out there that we need to explain that it is positive that you get the information that you need to make the decision in the public interest. I will try to assist in that as much as I can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. And a little while back, the gentleman that I defeated, Brian Hayes, an MP for the Conservative Party, came to see me. So he had lost the election, and he didn't get his job back in the Sioux at his place of employment. His wife was in a car accident. He has no pension. So he's in a situation where he has to make a decision. So he wanted to move to Ottawa to work for the Canadian Cancer Association or Big Brothers or something like that. It's stuff that he enjoys. But he wrote and got a negative letter back because he was a backbencher, had to sit out for 5 years. And so I've been doing some research, and I've been talking to many MPs from both sides of the aisle, and they find that interpretation kind of ridiculous, that Brian's able to pick up the phone, as has been talked about, and get a hold of the Prime Minister. It seems too restrictive. For me, I have a job when I go back. I have a 5-year window, and I can make my decision, run again, etc. So I just want to bring that to your attention, because I think that law, first of all, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then the interpretation of that as well. And final point, just recently in December, I was handing out Canada 150 pins to different people. We had a small allotment, so I went back and I met with the former MPs, NDPs, Conservatives, and they all tell the same story. We didn't talk about lobbying or anything like that, but they talk about the difficulty of transition for an MP back to the world and jobs. So. Your comments on that?
Certainly. Well, my first comment will be that the rule does not make a lot of sense. I do think that former public office holders need to be careful when they go back to working outside government, that they don't take advantage of information or contacts that they've obtained to then further their own private interests or that of the company. So there is a purpose for that rule in the ethics world. The law is written right now that it is 5 years. We do get requests for exemptions, but the law right now is written as if someone was a student, very short term, only doing administrative duties. So it's extremely limited in how I can apply this exemption. So I don't set the rule. The rule is 5 years. whether or not it's the will of Parliament to reduce the 5 years or give permission to the commissioner to reduce the 5 years, because right now, the way the law is written, I would not be permitted to reduce the 5 years. Is something that committee can look into. Absolutely.
Thanks, thanks very much. And with that, we're to Mr. Gord.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madame Bélanger, for being here this morning, and Mr. Bertrand. Now, I've always been concerned about the 20% rule for someone who's not registered as a lobbyist, but who comes to meet with public office holders or ourselves as members of Parliament, and they come and say, well, we're here to talk about this subject, but we're not a lobbyist. So how can we check if they really are respecting the 20% rule? They might say, oh, it's just a small file that might take a day a month, but we have to take them at their word, and faced with that, I feel we're not well equipped to deal with it. Do you have any advice for us? Well, I would ask you to keep a record of the people you've met with and the subjects discussed, the number of people you've met with. You can give them advice and encourage them to register, but I don't think it's your role really to ensure that they meet the 20% rule. You have enough responsibilities, but if you have any doubts, inform our office. We are very well aware of what's going on in the media, and we really try hard to be proactive. If we see something, we get in touch with the lobbyists, and we try to verify the information. We remind them of their obligations, and if you have any doubts, just advise us, and we'll communicate with them, because we can't know all of the names of all of the companies and organizations and people with whom you meet. The only advice I can give you is to keep note of it, because I might ask you to confirm information that was given to me, and you will have to provide me with a correction if there are corrections to be made, or indeed confirm that you've met with that person. Well, often these people represent charitable organizations or NGOs. So when those people represent big companies, multinationals, should it not be more automatic if it's Facebook, Google, or Netflix or some such entity, that we expect that the CEO might come and meet with the MPs but isn't registered? Well, that's problematic. Well, it could be automatic, but not in the way the Act is currently drafted. So that will require legislative changes if you want all of those companies to be obliged to register. Well, even within those companies, if the people say, I think it's impossible for me to do more than 5 or 10%, but if there are 10 people in the company that are each doing 10%, well, that's a full-time job. Well, yes, indeed, and there they have the obligation to register. If the total of all of the individuals involved adds up to more than 20%, they have that obligation. So it's cumulative. Yes, it is. And if we declare all of these people, oh, I promise you, we'll look at that. Yes, indeed. Are there other provisions that you think we should pay attention to particularly with the new study we'll be undertaking that might facilitate your work as much as ours? Because registering all of these people and looking at a resume of what they've said to us, it's not exactly obvious. No, no, we're not talking about a summary. What we're sending to you is very simple. It's just a request to clarify the information. It's the date, the people present, and the subject. So it's not a summary of what was said. It's just a list of subjects that we're asking you to verify. So in terms of legislative changes, I think I went through what I wanted to focus on. Transparency, we talked about the 20% rule that should be changed, communications that have been arranged, and a whole spectrum of possible penalties. There may be other details that I'm forgetting right now, but those are the major themes. Thank you. You're welcome.
Our next 5 minutes goes to Mr. Picard.
Madame Bélanger, Monsieur Bertrand, première fois qu'on se parle.
Thank you, Madame Bélanger and Mr. Bertrand. After 4 months in the position, what are the changes in lobbyist practices that you've observed that have evolved, or on the other hand, that might have changed how things are done through technologies? What should we be studying? What are the changes? Is there a correlation between the changes you've observed and the changes you're asking for? Well, the changes we're going to be asking for is simply so that the registry can continue to be effective and modern. And you know how technology works. It always has to be kept up to date. So if there are legislative changes to be made, then there are certain aspects of the registry that will have to change. That will require resources as well. I would say that with lobbyist practices, I believe that there were, what did we say, 23,000 monthly communications. I honestly believe that people are trying to meet their commitments, to respect their commitments. Are there new practices? Well, certainly we're hearing more and more about these issues in the ethics domain. No one wants to break the law. And I think that the more meetings there are with public office holders, the more open you are to meet with them, the more monthly reports will be tabled, and therefore the volume is expanding. And we'll have to have tools that will be adaptable to that. For example, for those who want to be able to register over the phone or their iPad, currently they can't do that. So we have to remain modern. These are the kinds of changes to make. In the thorniest issues that you're dealing with, if there are court cases, are there often the same themes involved, or are we seeing that there are new trends, new ways of doing things in the recruitment of professionals? Is the nature of these disputes, or has the nature of these disputes evolved over the years, or do they remain the same? Well, I think certainly that this kind of going to court is something that will be used more and more. There hadn't really been any in the past, and now we have one or two underway. So I think it's a tool that will, it's practically an oversight really of our work. So what's happening is that the 3 cases that are before the courts now, one has wrapped up, but they are attacking my impartiality on the one hand, and also that the decisions are reasonable. One is wine, to have put an end to the Apotex file after Mr. Sherman's death, and the other is reviewing the decision to not review the Aga Khan because he's not a lobbyist. The issue of MPs going back to work as lobbyists after their life in politics, what I'm finding it hard to understand is when an MP, after having in office for 2 or 3 terms, has made contacts and wants to go back to work, it's not to do anything to his personal advantage, but it's the experience that the marketplace is seeking to hire this person in a professional capacity because of their experience. So how do you make a distinction between the experience of a professional and the personal advantage? Well, first of all, when, as a public office holder, the person has left that position, they are subject to certain rules that are overseen by Commissioner Dion. For me, the only thing is that you are prohibited from becoming a lobbyist. So being a lobbyist is communicating with public office holders. And you have certainly developed relationships with your colleagues. You have certainly obtained information from the internal workings here, and that is the reason for that rule. It's not just for you in particular, but for the organization that is hiring you, that might give them an undue advantage over someone else. So you can go and work for organizations. You just can't become a lobbyist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have 2 quick questions, Commissioner. To that final point, do you get a list of public office holders who have approached the due date where where their commitment to not act as a lobbyist expires?
I do not get a list. So we read the Hill Times and we make sure that when people announce that they're retiring or that they will leave, we do not get a list. So it is somewhat difficult to ensure that people that leave are aware of their responsibilities. What the office, and I was actually in the other office when this practice started, when someone leaves, the letter you will obtain from Commissioner Dion will remind you of your obligations not to lobby under the Lobbying Act and to communicate with our office, but I do not get a list.
And will you, in your annual report as
Yes.
Commissioner, your first annual report, report the number of exemptions
Yes.
that you have?
Yes, there were 17 last year. 10 were granted, 7 denied. Or is it yeah, I think so.
Okay. And finally, to the caseload of 50 files.
Yes, 50.
Will you report on how many have been resolved, how
Yes.
many are yet to be resolved?
Yes, absolutely. There are currently 50 files open on that compliance
Thank you.
front.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the line of questioning of Mr. Sheehan that I think is an important thing for us to start to clarify, because again, the Act was brought in 10 years ago to try and cover off all manner of things, and we have a case like Bruce Carson. Well, Bruce Carson was in the Prime Minister's office, steps out, comes back, starts selling a product, and is evading the Lobbying Act. That's a fairly clear-cut case of someone using their power to open doors and avoiding the responsibilities of the Lobbying Act. A case of a backbench MP who wants to work for the Cancer Society would strike me as a very different thing. And I've met other former MPs who've wanted to do international work and have been told they can't. So the question is it would we define it by the nature of work, or would you feel it would be better if you, as commissioner, simply had the discretion to look at these and to decide whether or not this was a reasonable use of someone's skill to better society as opposed to pecuniary interest? Is that how we should be looking at changes?
I do think a criteria of public interest might be an interesting way of looking at it, because if someone wants to go work with an international organization, I don't know if it would be because of this prohibition as a lobbyist. It might be because of certain rules under Commissioner Dion's mandate for former designated public office holders, because you cannot go work with someone with whom you've had significant official dealings. So I can't speak to the particular facts of the case, but certainly there should possibly be a public interest aspect to look at as a criteria.
So
but it's a policy decision for decision makers. I will only apply.
So then the public interest, so it would be also lobbying and under the ethics? Because I didn't understand. I mean, some people have developed a certain expertise.
Yeah.
Say international
Yes.
good, because there's no way that you're selling products here to a government
Yes.
agency, but you've built a reputation, you've done good things,
Yeah.
people know you for that. That to me is public interest. So would we have to look at that under the ethics
You would
code
have
as well?
Well, the under the Lobbying Act, as members of Parliament, you're a designated public office holder. Under the Conflict of Interest Act, you're not. Right? It is. Well, some of you might be, but you have to be a minister or parliamentary secretary, and there are obligations in that act in relation that are forever and ever. There is no 5-year. You cannot take advantage of the position or use information that you've obtained during your position, and there is a 1-year or 2-year post-employment period in that act. Right. As members of Parliament, and you will know this better than me, but I don't believe there are post-employment obligations under the MP Code of Conduct, and under the lobbying, it's a prohibition on 5 years for you not to become a lobbyist.
Okay, and then just finally, you'd mentioned about financial constraints and updating
The registry.
the registry. Do you have a number that you think would help us get where you need to be?
Yeah, I have numbers.
Why did I ask that?
I like that question. The request that went before Treasury Board in the fall was a one-time $3 million over 3 years. So it was a little bit more at the beginning, and then spread out over the 3 years. And then after that, it would be $700,000 a year.
So thank you very much for that. We are going to suspend now, but we're going to actually go in camera. So I'd ask everyone to clear the room. We're going to deal with committee business, and when we resume after that, we'll have the Information Commissioner with us. So thanks very much for
Thank
attending
you.
today, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for your evidence.
Bienvenue. Merci à vous.
resume our meeting in public, and I would welcome our Information Commissioner, Ms. Maynard, and you've got 10 minutes for an opening statement, and we'll move to questions.
OK, merci. Bonjour et merci, Monsieur.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to appear before you today for the first time since my appointment as Information Commissioner of Canada. Joining me are Leila Michaud, Deputy Commissioner of Investigations and Governance, and Gino Grondin, Deputy Commissioner, Legal Services and Public Affairs.
And me to carry out the duties of Information Commissioner. It is an honor to serve Canadians in this role, and I look forward to the next 7 years of working to ensure openness and transparency at the federal level. My first 2 months on the job have been very busy and interesting time of learning. I met with each and every employee at the office during my first 2 weeks. It did not take long for me to see that I have an excellent and experienced management team, as well as a very dedicated and professional staff. My meetings with employees and managers allowed me to gain a deeper understanding of the work done by my office. I also gained a greater appreciation of the 35 years of institutional knowledge my office holds and the strong foundation I have to build on. In addition, I became more familiar with the challenges and the opportunities the organization is facing. This has allowed me to determine where to focus my efforts in the coming months and years. I have 4 priorities I would like to share with you. Ma première priorité consiste à
My first priority is to address the inventory of complaints my office has yet to complete while investigating new complaints as they arrive. I will also work with my team to improve operational efficiency and streamline the investigation progress to reduce delays when possible. My second priority will be to take steps to implement the anticipated amendments contained in Bill C-58. These proposed changes present potential operational challenges for my office. For example, if Bill C-58 is enacted as currently drafted, my office will have to manage, potentially for a number of years, 3 distinct complaint and investigation processes due to transition periods in the bill.
Sure that the day-to-day work at my office is open and transparent. I will also stress these values in my interactions with institutions, members of Parliament, and Canadians. In addition, work is already underway to enhance and refresh my office's web and social media presence. My goal is to make the complaint process simple and transparent for Canadians. I'll also want to provide more guidance to both complainants and institutions on the investigation process and the decisions that are taken, and more timely updates on access to information news and activities. Finally, my team will work closely with institutions to help them meet their obligations under the Access to Information Act, and we will address systemic issues. In the coming months, I intend to personally meet with Access to Information coordinators and the heads of a number of institutions to reinforce the importance of the collaborative approach and promote openness and accountability. I will embrace every opportunity to collaborate with you and with Parliament as a whole, with institutions and with other stakeholders, including the Privacy Commissioner. I will also emphasize the importance of sharing best practices. Canadians deserve to have institutions that are open by default and that make access a priority. Au cours de l'année à venir, et tout comme
For the coming year, and just like the last 6 years, my office's main estimates are $11.4 million, and I have 93 approved full-time equivalents. Approximately 80% of this funding will go to deliver our investigations program. The other 20% will be dedicated to our corporate services, such as finance, information technology, and human resources. As you likely know, the government announced $2.9 million in temporary funding for my office in the 2018 federal budget. I plan to use these funds to the resolution of complaints. In particular, I would bolster my investigations team for 2018-19. I would fill vacant permanent positions and rehire the experienced consultants that my office engaged last year. This would be good news for Canadians. My office would be able to complete more investigations in the coming year because of this additional funding.
Office would be provided with permanent funding to allow me to increase the size of my team permanently and thus bring stability to the office. The volume of complaints my office receives is increasing. My team registered nearly 2,600 new files in the year that just ended in March 31st. This is a 25% increase over 2016-17. And as more and more Canadians submit requests under the Act, the number of complaints will keep growing. I'm very much of the view that temporary funding and temporary staffing will not address the challenges my office faces. To meet this demand, my office needs more permanent funding. I am pleased that the President of the Treasury Board announced last June that my office's resources will be increased on an ongoing basis in response to the adoption of Bill C-58. However, this funding will not be sufficient to meet the growing demands on my office and serve the needs of Canadians. In closing, I wish to emphasize two aspects of the positive impact an increase in permanent funding would have for my office. First, as I've said, it would bring stability to the organization. I could hire enough employees to ensure the Act is appropriately applied and to respond to complaints in a timely manner. I could also retain these employees from year to year, providing needed continuity. Second, I could pursue innovative options for making the investigation process more efficient. I would like to capitalize on technology to enhance my office's service to Canadians. Ceci étant dit, j'aimerais vous remercier.
That being said, thank you again for inviting me to appear today. I look forward to further opportunities to report on the progress I am making against my priorities and on my statutory mandate. I will be pleased to take your questions.
And our first 7 minutes goes to Ms. Fortier.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Félicitations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And once again, I'm very pleased that you'll be able to come into this position at a moment of a very important transition for the Commissioner. Perhaps you could share with us how your transition functioned after the last Commissioner, to give us an idea how files were working and what your relationship was with the former Commissioner. Well, I didn't really have the opportunity to have a transition with Ms. Legault. I met her over lunch, I think during the third week after I began to work, and Leila and Gino and I had a meeting with all of the employees. They're all very professional, and they all showed me what the processes were in order to have a smooth transition. I also took the opportunity, as I said earlier, to meet with each and every one of my employees. So I had 97 people to meet, and that really allowed me to learn a great deal and to hear from them what they considered to be the positive aspects of what was going on in the office and what could be improved as a team. So that was really good. And now that you've had the first 60 days, which is not a great deal, just to give you an idea of where you can take off from, I see that you have priorities, but in the short term, what really do you want to undertake? And in the mid-term and longer term, what do you hope to achieve over the course of the next year? Well, in the short term, certainly to attack that inventory of files and look at with the team members to see what the processes are that are in place and how we can become more efficiently very quickly. Also, I want to begin to meet with institutions, the coordinators within the teams, and also the heads of institutions to discuss and see how we can have better collaboration, and also so that we can have an open government by default. So with the media, that's what I'm going to work on. In the midterm, we certainly have to look at the processes, and institutions and Canadians must understand the complaint process, but also our decisions. So for me, it's very important to have better publications of what we've done to help people understand the decision-making process to ultimately decrease the number of complaints we receive. Well, you mentioned earlier that you have 2,600 new investigations to carry out on top of all of the files that are in the backlog. And so we're aware of that. How are you going to not create a delay with these new files while you're dealing with the backlog? Because I imagine that this is a trend, that's an upward trend, receiving these new requests and complaints. Well, it's interesting to see that over the past 6 years, applications or complaints have been received, and it's up 215%. And so we've begun the year with an inventory of 3,400 some complaints. And what we want to do is exactly what you're proposing because right now people are waiting about 7 months before a complaint is assigned to an investigator. What I suggested is that we form 2 teams, and we have an intake team and a team that will deal with the inventory, and trying to attack this, I'll use the word Everest, from both sides. I think if we could speak with complainants as soon as we receive a complaint, it will be much easier for us to go out and get the information that is required and try to respond very quickly. And so clearly there are files that are quite old and files that are huge. So I also want to try and focus not on the volume of complaints, but on the performance of our investigators as to how they deal with institutions. For example, the huge issues, no one wants to deal with them. If we're trying to get through a lot in a hurry, we can't tackle those first. So we have to look at the quality of our interaction with these institutions. If we're not able to get along, I will not be able to really deal with the new legislation in terms of those files. Well, indeed, I was going to ask how many files you thought you might be able to put away this year. But there are different levels of investigations. However, if I was going to ask you what your objective was for the next year in terms of closing files, what would that be? Well, with the new funding that we were given, we were hoping to close 2,500 files. So if I can only do that, I'll never be able to deal with the backlog. So is it an issue of funding? How are we ever going to catch up and get ahead of this wave and not behind it? Well, the office has never had increases in terms of funding and staff over the last 6 years. So, and we've seen an increase in the number of complaints received. So we're going to have more funding from Parliament so that I can hire more teams and not to be hiring consultants every year that open up files and don't ever have time to finish them. So we want to have permanent employees and keep them. But there's also certainly been gains that we've seen in terms of efficiency. And I've been surprised to see that there are still an awful lot of paper transactions that are done within the office, and ultimately the ideal situation would be to have an electronic system for the exchange of information and files. And so our new online complaint form is very popular, and it has allowed us to deal with all kinds of administrative complaints for delays or extensions that have been requested that are reasonable. And so 85% of the complaints are now dealt with electronically at that level. So the ultimate goal is to also have this system for exemptions and exclusions so that we can deal with them electronically as well. That would really be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your appearance today. Your predecessor composed an unprecedented scathing evaluation of Bill C-58, a report card effectively with more fails than passes, and characterized it as regressive in terms of Canadians' access to information. You were somewhat more discreet when you appeared before us and said that anything in this bill that slows access or obstructs access is a concern, and any area where accountability is increased or access represents progress. Now, you've mentioned in your opening remarks the potential operational challenges should Bill C-58 be passed as it is today. It's in second reading in the Senate. A number of senators have indicated quite strongly that they will be making amendments to this legislation. Before you know the outcome of this piece of legislation, are some of your investigations or files on hold pending the legislation you will have to work with in the longer term?
No, because Mr. Chair, the complaints that we've received will have to be dealt with under the current Act. So any new complaints received after Bill C-58 is passed will then be affected by the amendments. And that's why I was saying is if currently if nothing changes under in the amendments, we will end up with 3 different type of investigation and complaint processes, because the order-making power comes into effect a year after Bill C-58 will be approved. That means I'm going to have the old-fashioned complaint system with recommendation, a 1-year new system with recommendation also, and then in a year from now, then I would have the power to issue orders. This concern has been addressed already through a letter that I've sent to Mr. Bryson, and I'm told that they're looking into it. I've also sent a letter to the Senator Vignette, who's responsible for the bill. I've addressed those concerns with them.
So you're looking to Senate amendments to improve C-58 operationally for you?
Yes.
Now, among the backlog of files, an interesting story reported by the Toronto Star regarding a researcher's request for information on an RCMP investigation called, I believe, Project Anecdote. And the response that the researcher got initially was that the department would require an extension of 292,000 days. That would be 800 years, long past the life expectancy, not only the researcher, but probably many of your investigators. That was changed to 80 years. This would seem to be extremely unusual. Can you address exactly what, is that an excusable delay? Is the Library of Parliament and Archives...
I can't really comment on this particular file.
I understand.
I'm not even sure if we have a complaint about it yet, but from what my reading of the article, it was a request that would required the processing of 780,000 documents. So I understand that sometimes there's a calculation when, depending on the number of pages, some people have a little calculation. They're not supposed to do that, but they come up with how much time it's going to take one analyst to review this amount of paper. It is not acceptable that we would ask somebody to wait 80 years for an access. I think the question is then, how can we help the requester to narrow down, to scope down what they're really looking into? We're doing the same thing with complaints. Often and that's why I want to talk to the complainants when we receive their complaints right away, because if they know right away what they're looking for in that 1,000 pages, when we can focus on the 100 pages that they really need, we're going to be able to have very successful and timely responses. If we let it go and we don't respond right away and we don't scope down the investigation or scope down the request, it's going to take forever. Yeah. So we need to work with the complainants. We need to work with the institutions for them to understand that. Like, they have an obligation in the Act, and I think most institutions do it. Like, they have a duty to help But sometimes I think some stories like that comes out and it focuses on the wrong idea.
Sure. Well, I understand that this particular file is a closed file, 15 years old. One would think that a closed file, the essence of that file, could be quite easily researched and provided.
We have files that are really old and they have still security, national security issues that would, for purposes, for reason of security, they wouldn't let the information be released. And so it could be something like they just want to make sure.
Okay. Now, you addressed the matter of staffing and the preference for permanent staffing, permanent experience, but you also talked about using the budget to increase the number of hiring experienced consultants. Are these caseworker consultants that you're hiring?
Yes.
And is that a challenge for you in terms of having caseworkers who are familiar with the process and expediting results?
I can tell you that we're all fighting for the same consultants and experienced people because the professionals in access to information, in the world of access to information, are limited. And all the institutions are having the same problem as me. So we're all looking for people who have the knowledge and can, especially for me, if I only have a year, I don't want somebody that I have to spend 6 months training. We have enough to train them on the case management system and the technology that we're using at the office. But if they can come in and know exactly how to interpret the Access to Information Act and deal with the institutions, often they still have contact with these institutions. So we make sure we use those consultants that are retired, coordinator from D&D, but we'll give them files from D&D because they know the people there and they know the type of files and they can work on those type of files. But we're all it's a very difficult thing to hire people for 1 year and keep them and make sure that they can close enough files in that 1 year using appropriately the funding that has been provided.
Thanks. We're at time, unfortunately. So, Mr. Angus for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madame Maynard. It's wonderful to have you at our committee again. I want to follow up on some of the direction of my colleague. Your predecessor was very scathing in her analysis of Bill C-58 and its threat to access to information. The Canadian Journalists for Free Expression have also raised many, many concerns about the way the Act is written and how it will limit journalists being able to obtain information. Do you share their concerns?
I can tell you that I've 3 concerns currently with the Bill C-58, and the key area is the mandatory requirements in Section 6. I do believe that those requirements will limit access and will probably even deter people asking for information. So I've made that clear also to Mr. Bryson and his team and Senator Ringette that it's a concern I'd like to talk to them about. That is, I don't think is necessary. I think the statu quo with the Access to Information Act, the way it is, would be better for our Canadians. And the transition period for the order-making power is a concern, and the lack of enforcement for the order-making power also is something that we wanted to address with when the current Bill C-58 doesn't provide it doesn't provide me the authority to get a certification of the orders at the federal court level, and I think that could be something that will lead or could potentially have institution not abide by the orders if they don't have a mechanism that will make them respect them.
My colleague had mentioned a delay of 80 years, but we're seeing many delays of 900 days. And in the life of a political story, 900 days might as well be 80 years because it's pushing any documents past the life of a present parliament. So it makes the ability, those documents can be rendered fairly useless just by delay. Are you seeing an increase of this extensions? I've seen a number in my office already that we should be getting a straightforward answer, and we're told 900 days, 1,000 days. Are you seeing that that's starting to be used more often?
I think it depends on the institutions.
Yeah.
We have some institutions having a problem meeting their 30-day turnaround, that's for sure, and we're working with them They have high volume requesters, and I believe that we need to find solutions working with them. We often will assign some of our own investigators to work with them on a backlog or on a type of file so that we can get those out. But clearly there is an increased demand by 215%. So the institutions are like me, they're not funded as much maybe, and they're looking for professionals to do the analysis of the requests. I'm pretty much going to go around and meet all the institutions and try to, really focus on promoting open by default, and hopefully that will reduce the access requests too.
Well, I find when I make access to information requests, we'll get a response and they'll say, what you're asking for involves X number of pages. Can you be more specific, or maybe limit the timeline to a particular period? And we work with them and we get it turned around. We find there's other public institutions that do not seem to want to work with us and just throw up the blanket 900-day delay. There has been, report cards in the past, and there have been seemingly repeat offenders of certain institutions like Justice that don't seem to feel that these quasi-constitutional rights apply to them. Will you be doing report cards on the compliance rates and the willingness of the various public institutions to fulfill their obligations under the Act?
My understanding is the report cards are done by the Treasury Board Secretary, and our office uses them when we do meet with the institutions because we are interested in how they meet their obligation under the Act. My focus in the next year and my mandate is going to be more towards collaborations, open government, openness, transparency. Like, I really like to stay away from, and not stay away, but I really want institutions to understand the purpose of the access to information and the rights of Canadians, and hopefully, we'll be able to get them to collaborate and understand better. But for sure, we'll use those report cards just in our meetings with them with the ministers and with the ADMs and DMs to make sure that they understand what's going on in their institutions, and maybe it's a question of funding for them too.
Well, my concern is because people who ask for access to information, these are always can be very damaging to government, can be embarrassing. Certainly, it's no one's interest on the government side to have documents turned over if a journalist is looking or an opposition member is looking. So in the Act where they can turn down frivolous or vexatious requests, the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression have raised real alarm bells about that, because that's an arbitrary designation that could allow just a blanket refusal. Do you believe that the ministries, government should have that power, or should that be your power to decide what is frivolous or vexatious?
Under the current wording of the Bill C-58, the institution will not be allowed to turn down vexatious without our approval.
Without your approval?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we've already put together a pre-plan for our team to be responsive to those requests. We don't want those to be another reason to delay, responding to requests. So we're going to have a special team responding to those, so that institutions know right away if we approve or not. The challenge will be to determine the test. Luckily, there's other jurisdictions that have those provisions in their act, like the Ontario government, I believe, has, the Commission of Ontario has those. So if I'm not mistaken, so we'll use their jurisprudence and develop our own tests and own tools. And we want to work with the institution also to develop the questions that they have to answer before they make those determinations.
Thank you very much.
And our last 7 minutes goes to Mr. Saini.
Mr. Sheehan. Thank you very much, Ms. Maynard, and your colleagues for coming here today. I want to start off a little bit about the funding and the backlog of cases that you've had. I know the government has continued to provide funding to help you clear that backlog. So can you just give us an update on the additional funding that was given, how many additional complaints you did resolve, and how do you plan to use the additional funding for the coming year?
So last year, our office received $1.8 million extra for the year, and our plan was to close 1,900 cases. We succeeded that plan. We finished 74 cases in the.
And that was out of a backlog of 3,500 cases?
That was we started the year with 2,800 cases. We closed 19. Okay. So that means we ended up with another bigger backlog this year. The problem is we received the extra funding in December. Mm-hmm. So it's really difficult at that point to make decisions on a long-term basis when we don't know if we're going to have the funding for the entire year and if we're going to have the funding the following year. We're very excited this year. We have been told that the budget is providing us $2.9 million. We're finalizing with Treasury Board our requests asked for to get this fund as quickly as possible so that we can already plan it and spend it throughout the year. With this additional funding, we're going to be able to hire 22 new consultants or keep the ones.
How many consultants do you have currently?
Currently, we have 11.
How many you have? How many?
We have 50 investigators total.
Okay.
22% of are consultants, and we want to increase it to an additional 11 consultants because we only have the 1 year, so we cannot go and hire employees. We could do it on a term basis, which we're going to start a competition soon for new employees, but without the promise of a permanent and long-term employment, sometimes it's difficult to recruit.
So currently, how many people do you have investigating currently as we speak?
50.
50 out of the total of how many employees?
93.
93. So out of 50, you have 2,600 cases that you get every year. So on average, one person gets around 50 cases to investigate.
Yeah, we calculate about 45 cases per.
And how long does it take on average to investigate a case?
9 months on average. Some cases are very short, but other cases take longer.
Okay. Okay. Now, just looking at your annual report, there was the highest year or the highest mark was a 40% disclosure rate that you had. If you look at the graph, your chart, going back as far as 97 to 2015, 2016. And there has not been much legislative change from year-to-year basis. Why is it not consistent? Or is your office trying to do anything to increase the disclosure rate by hiring more people? Is that your forward-looking?
I think what you're referring to is the disclosure rates at the institution level.
Right.
So when there's a request of access, the institutions will release 40% of the information and will use exclusions and exclusion and exemptions to protect most of the information that they are being requested to release. We do see an increase in secrecy. We don't know why, and that's something that I'm new to the job, so my mandate will be to make sure we understand where does it come from. We are working towards a culture of openness. The government is very pro-open government at this point, so we need to get this message down to all the levels so that I don't know if it's the OPI, the person whose information is coming from, that's redacting, or the ATIP coordinators that have been told to redact, but clearly the message is not there. So that's something I need to work with the coordinators.
How much time do you have left? 3 minutes. I'll give it to Mr. Sheen.
Thank you. And congratulations, Carolyn, on your recent appointment.
Thank you, merci.
I saw the release from the Prime Minister's office, and you have quite an impressive resume, and I look forward to your commitment and ideas going forward. Some of your ideas that you talked about in your remarks was about how you can employ technology into the office to help deal with the increased number of requests for information. As you mentioned, this government is about open and transparency, and as we continue that messaging, we're surely going to get more and more interest and requests. And you did mention about the $2.9 million in temporary funding over the $11.4 million. And you talked a lot about some of your ideas in taking your temporary workers and making them into full-time workers. So if you could just share with us your philosophy. You don't have to get into the details precisely into the technology, computers you're using and whatnot, but just your comments about employing technology to help deal with the new open and transparent environment.
It's interesting because technology is a lot of different levels, and it could be as easily as I was surprised when I started my new position that I only had one screen in my office. I was used to use two screens.
Sure.
And people were questioning me like, but when you do a paper review and you have your file on one screen and you can work on the other screen into your Word document instead of going back up and down, and nobody like seems to to have used. So I've ordered two screens for everybody at the office. Like that was one of my first decisions. I said, and there was a lot of people doing reviews on paper still, like changing words with the red, pen, like the teacher. So we're now doing track changes. And I've done, so things like that. It could be as easy as this. It could be as complex as now, how do we interact with the institutions on a more efficient basis? And I'm not talking about emails. We're also trying to maybe do more face-to-face. If you have 1,000 pages, sending an email for each lines that are being redacted is a lot longer than if you do a face-to-face and we go through it together. There's going to be some of that, but the exchange of information, it's still done all by emails, and we're just in the last year started using emails to send our response to complainants and institutions. I want to do a lot more of that, and I want to receive the complainants' arguments and the institutions' representations through electronic means. But we need to have a protected system for that because there's a lot of personal information and a lot of secure information. Any top secret information will never have to, will never be able to use this technology. But for any normal cases where there's protected B type of information, I think we can get to that, where we have a portal maybe where information will be sent to us. We're looking into all that. I'm also talking with the commission, the privacy commissioner, because they're looking at some technology also to find just within the document information that's repetitive. So instead of doing it by, you can do a search. There's a lot of technology in that level that we're going to be looking into.
Thanks very much. So we have 6 minutes left in our meeting, and we do have to, or I would like to vote on the main estimates and get that out of the way. So if Mr. Wood, if you have a couple of questions to get through, 2 questions? Perfect.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ça me réconforte de voir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to see that you've incorporated more technology into the Commissioner's office. That works well for everyone. Are the complaints dealt with on a first-come, first-served basis? Or is there a category where maybe complaints are similar and some people are specialized in certain areas and other commissioners take on more complex cases? Is it first-come, first-served, or what is the system? Well, I'd say it's a bit of each. We realized that certainly there are some investigators that work very well with certain investigators, or certain institutions rather, or certain complainants. So we assign complaints or files that come in that regard. But we also looked to doing sorting of portfolios. It doesn't always work, because often files will deal with several subjects, so it's difficult to pigeonhole it. But what we do is a triage, absolutely, when we receive the complaints to see if we can't facilitate the resolution of a file upon arrival. If it seems more complex, it is assigned to an investigator. So it's a bit of each. So in the end, for the bulk of the work, when it's all said and done, are people satisfied when they receive the answers, or is it 50-50, or are they all disappointed? Well, I'll say that given that it takes so much time to deal with files, I'm sure that there are some clients who are happy to receive a response. But the fact that it arrives in a year and a half or 2 years after they filed a complaint, the relevancy of the information is perhaps not what it might have been. So I want to decrease these delays. As soon as people file a complaint, they really should receive the information they're seeking immediately. Well, given that the time frames are so long, when you see that complaint and a year later the person is told that it's going to take another 5 or 6 months, is there some way of checking with that person to see if it's even worth carrying on? Or we do that, of course, but it's unfortunate. I don't want to call the complainant and say, it's been 8 months, do you still want this information? I'd like to be able to call them immediately and say, what is the information you want? And can we do that immediately? Because the institution is ready to cooperate with us and find the information you want now. If you don't want that information, or if we can reduce the scope of the investigation, you might be less satisfied, but you'll have the information in 2 or 3 years, if not. So we need cooperation on both sides, not just from the institution when it's that kind of an investigation.
I appreciate your remarks here today, and I do hope that the Senate heeds your call for accepting amendments. Only government would think it's a good idea to have 3 complaint processes in place under one institution. So we've got a number of votes here, and I'll read them out and we'll quickly go through them. So shall vote 1 under Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying, less the amount granted in interim estimates carry in the amount of $3,064,719. Yes. Shall vote 1 under Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, less the amount granted in interim estimates carry the amount of $4,600,606. Shall vote 1 under Office of the Senate Ethics Officer, less the amount granted in interim estimates carry in the amount of $911,083. So agreeable. Shall vote 1 under Offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada, less the amount granted in interim estimates carry in the amount of $7,595,313. And shall vote 5 under Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada, less the amount granted in interim estimates carry in the amount of $17,020,494. And finally, shall the Chair report, vote 1 under Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying, vote 1 under Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, vote 1 under Office of the Senate Ethics Officer, and vote 1 and 5 under Offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners of Canada to the House. So very agreeable. And we're 2 minutes under time even. Thank you very much, and we're adjourned.